We studied what is causing these fatalities using science and data and evidence, and then we slowly treated it like the public health problem it was, and it got reduced.
So good guys, why then do you and Hillary want to control and restrict and limit gun manufacturers, gun owners, and the responsible use of guns and ammunition to the rest of us, the good guys, instead of holding the bad guys accountable for their actions? And Mr. President, if I may, I'd like to use Chicago, your hometown, a city that has some of the strictest gun laws in the nation, a city that for decades and still is under Democratic control, a city that has an outrageous and even embarrassing murder rate as my first example. Why can't we round up these thugs, these drug dealers and gang members, and hold them accountable for their actions, or allow the good people in Chicago access to firearms to protect themselves?
Good. All right. Well, let me, it's a multi-part question, so let me just say a couple things. First of all, the notion that I or Hillary or Democrats or whoever you want to choose are hell-bent on taking away folks' guns is just not true. And I don't care how many times the NRA says it. I'm about to leave office. There have been more guns sold since I've been president than just about any time in U.S. history. There are enough guns for every man, woman, and child in this country. And at no point have I ever proposed confiscating guns from responsible gun owners. So it's just not true. What I have said is precisely what you suggested, which is, why don't we treat this like every other thing that we use? We used to have really bad auto fatality rates. The auto fatality rate has actually dropped precipitously, drastically, since I was a kid. Why is that? We decided we had seatbelt laws. We decided to have manufacturers put airbags in place. We decided to crack down on drunk driving and texting. We decided to redesign roads so that they were less likely to have a car bank. We studied what is causing these fatalities using science and data and evidence, and then we slowly treated it like the public health problem it was, and it got reduced. We are not allowed to do any of that when it comes to guns, because people, if you propose anything, it is suggested that we're trying to wipe away gun rights and impose tyranny and martial law. Do you know that Congress will not allow the Center for Disease Control to study gun violence? They're not allowed to study it, because the notion is that by studying it the same way we do with traffic accidents, somehow that's going to lead to everybody's guns being confiscated. When we talked about background checks, if you buy a car, if you want to get a license, first of all, you got to get a license. You have to take a test. People have to know that you know how to drive. You don't have to do any of that with respect to buying a gun. And when we talked about doing effective background checks, it was resisted, because the notion was we were going to take your guns away. I just came from a meeting today in the Situation Room in which I've got people who we know have been on ISIL websites, living here in the United States, U.S. citizens. And we're allowed to put them on the no-fly list when it comes to airlines. But because of the National Rifle Association, I cannot prohibit those people from buying a gun. This is somebody who is a known ISIL sympathizer. And if he wants to walk in to a gun store or a gun show right now and buy as many weapons as ammo as he can, nothing's prohibiting him from doing that, even though the FBI knows who that person is. So, sir, I just have to say respectfully that there is a way for us to have common sense gun laws. There is a way for us to make sure that lawful, responsible gun owners like yourself are able to use it for sporting, hunting, protecting yourself. But the only way we're going to do that is if we don't have a situation in which anything that is proposed is viewed as some tyrannical destruction of the Second Amendment. And that's how the issue too often gets framed.
Perhaps nothing frustrates many conservatives more than seeing someone argue about guns using data, logic, and facts, rather than emotions or inflammatory slogans. And that is exactly what happened in this exchange. A Trump supporter entered the discussion with a familiar sense of confidence, repeating a series of talking points that have appeared countless times in debates over gun ownership in the United States. Armed criminals, Chicago. Democrats want to take away Americans' guns. These are arguments that anyone who follows American politics could have predicted in advance. Nearly every statement followed a well-worn script. Yet Obama did something that Republicans often struggle to counter. He brought the conversation back to the facts. From the very beginning, he directly challenged one of the most frequently repeated claims in the modern conservative gun movement: the idea that Democrats are secretly trying to confiscate all firearms from American citizens. Obama rejected that argument outright. His reasoning was simple. He pointed out that he served as president for 8 years, and during that time, gun sales actually surged. That fact alone significantly weakens a large portion of the opposing argument. If Obama truly intended to eliminate gun ownership rights, as conservatives had long warned, then why did gun purchases increase? Why did gun stores continue to thrive? And why did millions of Americans continue buying firearms at unprecedented rates? The answer is fairly obvious. For years, that fear has functioned more effectively as a political tool than as a genuine threat. What made this exchange even more noteworthy was that Obama never responded emotionally. The questioner seemed eager to steer the discussion toward confrontation and outrage. Obama, however, responded calmly, almost as if he were explaining a basic logical principle to people unwilling to accept reality. His comparison to automobiles was particularly effective because it highlighted an inconsistency in how Americans debate gun policy. Consider the facts. No one views the requirement to obtain a driver's license as government oppression. No one believes that seatbelt requirements, airbags, or traffic safety standards are signs of tyranny. Nor do people object to penalties for drunk driving or mandatory auto insurance. Society accepts those regulations because cars can kill people. The reason is that simple. Yet when someone proposes applying even part of that same logic to firearms, many conservative voices immediately begin warning about authoritarianism, government overreach, and the loss of American freedom. Obama exposed that inconsistency quite clearly. However, the greatest pressure on the Republican position came later when he discussed research into gun violence. This is a less frequently discussed issue, but an extremely important one. Obama noted that Congress had for many years restricted the CDC's ability to study gun violence as a public health issue. Simply thinking carefully about that fact reveals how unusual it is. In one of the wealthiest and most developed countries in the world, a country where mass shootings regularly dominate headlines, many lawmakers opposed efforts to study the causes and consequences of the problem. Their concern was that research findings might lead to policy recommendations. That fact alone says a great deal. If a political viewpoint feels threatened by objective scientific research, then perhaps the foundation of that viewpoint is not as strong as its supporters believe. One of the most striking moments of the discussion came when Obama addressed the issue of individuals suspected of having ties to ISIS still being able, in certain circumstances, to legally purchase firearms. This point exposed a contradiction that conservatives often avoid addressing. For years, Republican politicians have emphasized threats related to terrorism, radicalization, border security, and national defense. They have supported numerous surveillance and security measures designed to prevent potential threats. Yet, when the conversation shifts to firearms, the argument changes completely. Suddenly, even individuals suspected of connections to extremist organizations are viewed as people whose access to weapons should not be restricted. Obama posed a difficult question to refute. If the government can prevent someone from boarding an airplane for security reasons, why should it not be able to prevent that same person from purchasing large quantities of firearms? It remains a paradox for which no truly convincing explanation has yet emerged. What this video demonstrates most clearly is how Obama exposed the reality that many modern Republican arguments about guns rely more on fear than on policy consistency. For years, the NRA convinced many conservative voters that any form of gun regulation represented the first step toward the complete confiscation of firearms from American citizens. Background checks, tyranny. Research into gun violence, tyranny. Preventing suspected terrorists from buying guns, also tyranny. Greater accountability, still tyranny. Ultimately, every policy discussion reaches a dead end when one side wants to discuss specific solutions, while the other treats every reform proposal as the opening move toward dictatorship. That is also why this debate continues to be discussed years after it took place. Obama never argued that law-abiding citizens should not own firearms. On the contrary, he repeatedly acknowledged the legitimacy of gun ownership for hunting, sport shooting, and self-defense. What he opposed was the notion that freedom means the complete absence of limits, regulations, research, or accountability. That is also one reason conservatives often struggle to build broad public consensus on this issue. Most Americans do not believe that background checks are extreme. Most people also do not believe that individuals suspected of terrorist connections should have easy access to firearms. And most Americans do not view research into gun violence as controversial. Yet, the Republican political establishment often reacts to even the smallest reform proposals as though the nation were facing a crisis of personal liberty. That is precisely why moments like this tend to make many people within the MAGA movement uncomfortable. Obama did not raise his voice. He did not engage in personal attacks. Nor did he appear angry or lose his composure. He simply used logic and facts to test the strength of the arguments being presented. And for many conservatives, that may be the most difficult challenge to confront. Because deep down, many understand that the questions he raised are legitimate. If you found this analysis interesting, feel free to share your thoughts. Do you believe Obama was entirely correct in this debate? Or do you think there are still valid conservative arguments regarding gun control? Share your perspective in the comments section.